Okay, good afternoon, folks, and welcome to LEARNEast 2021. My name is Luke Plord. I'm part of the digital learning team. I have two people with us today. We have two people, Dan Goggin and Sarah Flanagan from Gibson Neal. This is session C1, 3D printed creations in the K-5 classroom. And Sarah and Dan will be running through some of their own experiences. Thank you both for doing that. A reminder that the session runs from 1:30 to 2:30. If you have your mics on, I'll ask you to please mute yourself. What the presenters have decided to do is that they will be monitoring the chat as well. So if you have any questions, you can just drop your questions in the chat box, and they will look after that. I'll be back at the end of the session. I'll be here during the session, but I'll be back at the end of the session as well to do a wrap up. And with all, that's it. Sarah and Dan, thanks very much. It's all yours.
All right. Well, thanks for having us, Luke. And thanks for you guys for tuning in. It was a really fun project that we did, so we're happy to tell you guys about it and how we got started. So again, my name's Dan Goggin, and that's Sarah Flanagan. We both taught grade 2 French immersion at Gibson Neal this past year. And we collaborated together on a really cool project that the students really loved. And we kind of want to just tell you what we did and then tell you some other ideas that maybe you could use in your classrooms for whatever grade level. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. Oops. So our project was designing 3D animals in the classroom. It came about from a project that I had did with my class the year before in the COVID shortened year. We made our animals using 3D shapes, using foam shapes that I bought at Michael's or the dollar store or whatever, and it just cost so much money. Sarah and I ended up doing a PL with Jacob Lingley, which was on Tinkercad. And when we did that presentation, I immediately had an idea, and I sent Jeff Whipple, you see his lovely picture there. I sent him an email. He put me in touch with Brilliant Labs, who have a great program where basically anything technology-wise, they're willing to help you out in the classroom. And they gave both of us a 3D printer to use in our classroom. So instead of the foam shapes, we printed them ourselves. So this is what Tinkercad looks like, and it was really cool to use. It's really simple. All the shapes that you need are on the side, and you just click and drag, and then you manipulate them. We started off with basic stuff, and Sarah's going to talk a lot more about the cross-curricular aspects and stuff like that. But we printed off a bunch of 3D shapes, which was really nice to see because the kids could see it happening, feel it, pass it around. They watched the printer in our classroom, which was very quiet. It wasn't noisy at all. But then once we got into Tinkercad, all of a sudden these animals started taking form. So here are a couple. The one on the right is Foxy Brown, which was the first one that one of our students made. And then we have a rhino on the left. This all came with a learning curve because none of us had done it before. So Sarah and I did the half-hour PL on Tinkercad. We were given some leave time, a half day to go and play around on Tinkercad before we started our project. That was basically it. It was us experimenting on our own, and we learned as we went. So the fox ended up coming off the printer. As you can see on the right, it looked like that. And essentially what ended up happening is I had to cut that skirt off at the bottom, and I cut all 4 of its legs off because they were too skinny. The tail fell off. So we learned and we improved, and the rhino was one of the last ones that we did. So it's a little bit thicker. The legs are a better shape just because the person who did the fox, we learned from their mistakes, and we redid the fox later on as well. So after we all came up with an animal, or we picked an animal out of a hat. We did our research on the animal. We had maybe an hour and a half a week, so twice a week, to play around on Tinkercad itself to come up with our animal. Then we continued with our literacy work, and we came up with some poems, some shape poems with our animal, which was really fun and exciting. We talked about the habitats and all that stuff, and we came up with a creative writing piece, which was a lot of fun as well. We did a few other projects that, again, Sarah will talk more about the different cross-curricular aspects. And then the kids got to go home with their animals at the end of the year, and it was really cool. So I'm going to pass it over to Sarah, and she's going to talk more. She's going to talk more about the cross-curricular aspects. Just let me unshare here. There we go.
So yeah, we were able to do so much with this project and just kind of cover so many different subject areas. We talked about art and design, we talked about science, we talked about literacy and numeracy, and the kids were just so engaged and really, really loved the project. So I'm going to also share my screen. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the projects that we did, or some of the other kinds of things that you could do at another grade level or in your classroom. So we were both teaching in grade 2 French immersion, and the kids are pretty young, but it's still something that they became very familiar with, and it was really easy to use. So some of the things that we learned about how to design in a 3D space. We talked about art and design aspects of creating things in sort of a 3D space as opposed to on just a drawing. We learned about all kinds of different 3D shapes when we were doing the project, so the kids could name the shapes, they could talk about the different shapes in their animal, they could talk about the shapes in other animals, and they could talk about the kinds of shapes that they were using. There was a science aspect, so we talked about animals, they learned all about their characteristics, they learned about their habitats, and they learned about what they need to live. And because each student was kind of doing a different animal, they could learn from what other students were doing about the animals that they were doing. And there was also a literacy aspect, so we did a lot of different writing. Students wrote poems, they wrote some informational pieces, and they did some creative story writing. So when we got started, like Dan said, the kids kind of all chose an animal. And these are some of the animals that my students made. And there was a bit of a learning curve for them. Just a lot of the kids have never worked on a laptop. They're more familiar with a mobile device or a tablet. So there was a lot of sort of things that we had to do before we could kind of even start working on each of their animals. So the program that we used, called Tinkercad, is incredibly student friendly. There's a lot of sort of built-in shapes that you can use, so you're not kind of designing from the ground up. So for kids, and especially for young kids, that's really great because they already have something they can kind of start with. They learned how to manipulate shapes in space and put things together to create a design. Really nice aspect of the project, to cover getting kids to think outside the box and think about how they could use certain shapes and work within a constraint to make a design or create what they wanted to create. And this is my class kind of with all their animals, and you can see that they really enjoyed it, and they were all really proud of their work, and it was really kind of special for them to watch their work come off the printer, and they were really fascinated by the printer. They spend a lot of time working on their designs. So like I said, a lot of these kids have never really used a laptop computer or even a desktop computer. So learning how to use the keyboard, learning how to use the mouse, that we had to spend a lot of time doing that with them before we could kind of even get started on working on their animals. And, you know, they got frustrated in the beginning, but they picked things up really quickly, and just kind of ran with it as soon as they became more comfortable. I think we probably spent a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, getting them sort of familiar with the technology. And once they were familiar with it, they just became so adept at figuring out how to use it and problem solving. So like I said, they had the opportunity to learn about different animal characters, which is one of the outcomes for grade 2, You and Your World. And I guess this year it was more of like an exploration, but in the FI program, we talk about different things, and they learned a lot about different vocabulary, and they got to learn a lot about something that they were interested in. And a lot of the kids were really interested in animals, and it was nice for them to kind of pick maybe an animal that they were more interested in and learn a little bit more about that. And they would include a lot of those characteristics in the little projects that they made. So this is a little hippopotamus right here. And then there's also, I think that one's a cat or a dog maybe. This is an informational writing piece that they did. So Dan showed you some poems that his class did, and we also did some creative writing, but they also did some informational pieces. This is kind of in the form of a Divinette or a Who Am I, sort of a Guess Who. And they're talking about the different characteristics that their animals have. So this was an opportunity for them to learn about different vocabulary words, introducing new French words into their vocabulary. And, you know, they're working on their sentence structure. They're working on all kinds of things here. Like I said, they learned a lot about different shapes. They could name the shapes. They could talk about different parts of the shapes. So again, that's part of what they're doing in grade 2 numeracy. So we were able to talk about that and include that in our project as well. So I'm going to hand it back over to Dan now. And after he's done, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the different kind of things that you can do in your classroom.
So I just wanted to show you one of the, like Sarah had mentioned, the Divinette, the Qui Suis, the Guess Who that we did. That was all info that they researched and found. And we worked really hard on the writing structures for them to be able, it took a couple of weeks for them to get each of those sections done with their writing. But what we ended up doing, or what my class ended up doing, we turned it into a center. And I'll just share my screen again and show you. It was pretty cool, or I liked it, and the kids enjoyed it as a game. Key switch. Okay, so I don't know if you can see it or not. Is it up there, Sarah?
Yeah, you can see it.
Okay. So basically they had, whoops. So I had the audio for them at home so they could read along with me if they needed the help. And it was essentially a guessing game. So they picked one. If they were wrong, it told them to try again. So they'd go back and try again. When they got it right, it was bravo, and they could pick another one. And it had all of the work that they had done. And again, this was 100% their work that they got to see and play. And so all they had to do was this center, all it needed was one iPad between a couple people, and they would take turns reading back and forth. And again, for the people who couldn't quite get the vocabulary down, my audio was there over top. So there was a lot of stuff that we got to do with them. Let's see. Just trying to unshare that. Okay. There we go. So the next part I wanted to talk about is why some people probably may not want to try it. A project like this. It was a very big project, but it was very rewarding. And like Sarah said, it came with a learning curve, and we were so impressed at the resiliency of these kids. They did not give up. There, of course, comes difficulties with technology. We had many printer malfunctions, but it didn't kind of deter us from keeping on. We have, I think the one on the left is a penguin. There's our class pet is a sock monkey. That was the one in the middle that didn't have its hair printed, and the other one was a cat that didn't work out. And these were all little examples of things where people could be like, oh, I don't want to do it. But our kids, they just kept going, and they were so proud when it actually worked. And when one didn't work, we just tried it again. And I'm going to tell one story of what happened with the printer that I was using. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get, whoops. Trying to unshare my screen. That's all right. So the printer that I was using, something happened where I couldn't figure out what was going on. So we had somebody from Brilliant Labs who was working with us virtually from Newfoundland. And I had done a couple Teams meetings with him, and he was trying to walk me through. He also helped us set it up, which was interesting in itself because it's very overwhelming to see, but we just kept going. Like the pieces all come in very small, where when you open the box and you see 100 pieces and you think there's no way I'm going to be able to put this all together, then all of a sudden, one piece at a time, and you end up with this really cool piece of technology in your classroom. But all of a sudden, mine just stopped working. It was working great, then all of a sudden it wasn't. And we kept trying things. So I did 2 Teams chats with him, and it was a Friday afternoon, and I had a third one scheduled with him for like 5:30, which is not a time I like being at school on a Friday afternoon. And Sarah was still there. I had been playing around with it, trying to figure it out myself, and I went over to her class, and I saw something on her computer that, or on her printer, sorry, that just didn't look the same as mine. And I ran back to my room, and that was what was wrong. One piece had fallen out of position, had slipped, and I had solved it. It took me a little while to get it back in the right position and tighten it with these tiny little tools that the printer comes with. And then all of a sudden we tried it again, and it worked almost right away. And it was such a rewarding email to send to the guy in Newfoundland saying I had figured it out, and got to enjoy the rest of my Friday without having to play around anymore and do Teams meetings and not know if it was going to work or not. So being able to solve your own problems as you go, as they come up, is a really cool way to kind of just learn together with the kids and with new technology. But for those that may be worried about like, oh, this is too much, we did watch a few YouTube videos to help us. But we were both just willing to try. That was the thing. Neither one of us had used the technology before. Neither one of us had used Tinkercad before. We just gave it a shot, and we were in pretty constant communication about what was working and what wasn't. And we noticed different what's the filament? Different filaments worked better, and so we just tried different things and were willing to accept whatever result happened. The next thing we tried to do with them was we tried to get other people involved, other classes involved in our school, and a lot of people were hesitant just because it's technology based. But we had another grade 2 class and we had another grade 5 class that were willing to give it a shot. And the other grade 2, again, they didn't have the easiest road, but they only asked for help once, and then they kind of just went on their own the rest of it. And again, after, the teacher had the same feelings that we did, that it's so rewarding just kind of getting through to the end when you start a project and all of a sudden there's a road bump, but you just persevere and go through, and the kids loved it, and the teachers are already talking about what they could do with it next year. So again, if you think it's too much for you, you can do it. There's always people to help, especially the people at Brilliant Labs and Jeff Whipple and Matt McGuire that are very technology oriented. but just give it a try. It's really worth it. And the kids, the skill sets that they have naturally compared to us on something like an iPad is it's pretty cool to see. The last thing I wanted to talk about was I have one little video that I'm going to show. All right, just 1 second. It's just a video that we sent to Brilliant Labs when we were done. They wanted us to keep track of our work. So here is the little video that my students and I made. It has some pictures and it's them reading, which is kind of cute. So here it is. And I'm going to pass it back over to Sarah if I can figure out how to get out of the share. Oh,
I think that there should be like a little X over your video that you can click, Dan, and that should end the sharing.
It was there the first time. This one's been completely different. Whoops. Yeah, this one, it just says spotlight me and that's it. Let's see. Luke, do you have any tips for me? I'm not seeing the stop share button anymore.
I'm gonna see if I can take control, Dan, just a second.
Okay.
Sarah, can you take control on the top of your screen there because you're one of the presenters?
Just a second here. Oh, take control. I just did. Is that working?
Dan, can you check up top there when you look at, do you have on top of your screen take control and all your icons, and beside your microphone there's an arrow there. Is there an arrow or an X?
It's just an arrow.
Just press on that for a second. Because that should be your X there.
Because it's still saying share your screen or share your window.
When you click on that, there you go.
Give control?
No, so
or
here.
Stop presenting.
You got it.
No. All right, there we go.
There
Sorry about that, guys.
No worries. I think Sarah's typing.
Sorry, I'm just answering someone's question here. Yeah, so now I'm going to kind of talk about, I'm going to share my screen again here. And I'm going to talk about some of the different things that you could do at different grade levels. So we were kind of working at the primary level, but that doesn't mean that this isn't something you couldn't do in upper elementary. Dan said a grade 5 class was working with it. My husband teaches grade 3 at another school, and I came home talking about the project, and he got a printer for his classroom, and the kids there were doing some projects, or middle school level and high school level. I know at FHS they have a lab with 3D printers in it, and they use the same Tinkercad software. I did a PL there a few years ago about 3D printing, and they have all kinds of great stuff in their lab. But that doesn't mean that even if you're someone who's teaching high school, who's not teaching in technology, that doesn't mean that this isn't something that you could use in your classroom. So there are so many different things that you can do with the printer and apply them to different kind of curricular areas. And it's really kind of just limited to what you want to do with it and what your students come up with. So your own creativity and your own students' creativity, and just your imagination kind of can let you do whatever you want with this technology. And these are some of my kids here showing the different projects that they made. And like Dan said, they were just so proud of the things they made, and they were so positive. When they were talking about other students' projects, they were so interested in what other kids were doing, what their classmates were doing. And it was just so engaging for them. So it really gave them the opportunity to be really creative while learning about all of these other areas that, we could have taught in a different way, but maybe the kids wouldn't have been quite as engaged as they were. This was a project that they really loved. I know I heard from a lot of parents just telling me how much their kids loved this project. It's also a really good opportunity to collaborate with other teachers. So, again, even if you're not at the elementary school level, where maybe you're sort of teaching your own class in a variety of different subject areas, at the middle school level, you could collaborate with, the math teacher and the English teacher and the art teacher and the technology teacher, where you're sort of doing all these kind of different things. You can talk about sculpture if you're in an art class. You can do a creative writing piece where you're maybe creating a character. You can talk about geometry and all kinds of different things. And it's, it's not just limited to something as basic as 3D shapes. You can talk about, maybe some more advanced aspects of geometry, because you are kind of working in a 3-dimensional plane. So there are things like angles that people can think about and all kinds of stuff. And we really found that other educators were really interested in what we were doing. So like Dan said, we had a lot of questions about it. And there were only a couple people that sort of decided to do it in their classroom, but I think people were interested in what we were doing. And it's just a really great opportunity to collaborate with other educators. Again, at the high school or middle school level, if you're in a science class, you could use it to create, models of chemical structures or models of DNA, or there's just so many things that you can do with this. And again, Tinkercad is just such an easy program to use. It's not so sophisticated that it's something that's intimidating. It really is very, the learning curve for Tinkercad is really not one that's difficult, I would say. I know that there are other 3D modeling programs that you can get, things like SketchUp, and some other programs that are a little bit more sophisticated than Tinkercad, but it really is student friendly, and it really is friendly maybe for someone that doesn't have as much experience with technology. So really, it really is just limited to kind of your own imagination and your own willingness to sort of take risks in your classroom. We did have some limitations with what we could do with the printer. The printers that we're using are sort of designed for home use or classroom use, so they're not huge machines. The things that you're going to create on them are limited in size, which is, totally okay for what we were doing, and I think for what, anybody might want to do in the classroom. I think Dan mentioned they're not noisy at all. Mine's actually running in the background right now. But my bed is not leveled properly, so it's not printing properly right now. But again, that's just, there's troubleshooting that you kind of have to do with them. They can be finicky, but the results are very, very rewarding. The design application, again, they're using Tinkercad. It's not a particularly sophisticated program, so there are some limitations. You've got sort of set shapes that you can work with and change the size of, but it's a little bit more difficult to maybe do like 3D modeling from scratch. But again, for most students, that's not something that they're going to be able to do without a lot of other sort of training. So it's really great in that aspect. It's very, very easy to use. And the limitations from the program, the fact that you just sort of have certain shapes to work with, kind of creates some constraints that can really help foster creativity when kids are being asked to do a project. So they're asked to design something and they're sort of given a limited number of shapes that they can use, or a limited size that they can use. So the constraints that are kind of put on them sort of help them think outside the box and think creatively. So we really found that even though there are those constraints, it was just such a great thing to have in the classroom. I think I said earlier, we spent a lot of lead time working with the kids just because we were working on laptops, and a lot of them are more familiar. You can use it on an iPad, and a lot of the kids are more familiar with an iPad, but we just happen to have a laptop card at the school, so we have enough laptops for each student. So just teaching them how to use the computer took a little bit of time, but again, they're just so adept at technology that they really caught on very, very quickly. And then again, the printing for them, they loved watching the printer. It was just fascinating for them to watch the printer build the animals. The printer is an additive printer, so it sort of lays down a layer of plastic and builds up as it's creating your little object. And the kids just loved watching it. I would usually print, 2 or 3 a day. They were small enough that it would only take, 2, 3, 4 hours to print one. And the kids loved it. So it was kind of just on all the time in the classroom, and they would, like to come. I had it on my desk, and they would like to come up and look at it, and they would, once something was finished printing, they were just so excited about it. So, and it was also kind of an opportunity just to learn about some other applications of 3D printing. I know in my class, we talked a little bit about some of the things that 3D printing is used for. And we watched a little video about, I think, houses in maybe the Netherlands that they're 3D printing out of concrete. So just sort of how the technology is being applied outside of the classroom, and it's not just limited to kind of these little plastic objects that they're making. It was just so valuable for the kids. They learned a lot, and it was so valuable and rewarding for us too. The kids loved it. It was so much fun working with them on this project. They learned a lot, and again, not just about technology, about so many different things. And even at the end of the project, we took a little bit of time to talk about what happens to your project after you're done, and like you're using a lot of plastic, where does that go? And so there was that opportunity as well. So that's about it for me. I'm going to show you a little video of my class as well. And I'm actually just going to stop sharing for a minute because I think I forgot to turn on my audio. Yeah. So this is just some of my students reflecting on what they learned in this project and what they enjoyed about the project. And I'll let the students take it from there. Oops.
Can you tell me about the animals that you made?
Yeah.
What animals did you make?
Rhino and an alligator.
What made you choose those animals?
They're spicy.
Can you tell me what animal you created?
Raccoon.
Why did you choose to make a raccoon?
Because I love them.
Can you tell me what kind of materials we used to create our projects?
Plastic and a 3D printer.
Did you like watching the 3D printer?
Yeah.
It was really neat. You thought it was really interesting?
I made a parrot and I made a cat.
Can you tell me something that you learned about your parrot?
I learned that it lives in a tropical forest and it eats seeds. I like moving the shapes to make the animal.
Did you learn a lot about design? That's awesome. And can you tell me what animal you made?
I made a fox.
Thank you. Can you tell me what you learned about shapes from doing this project?
We learned different names and stuff.
And did you learn some of the differences between different types of 3D shapes?
I learned that you can take something from off the computer and make it into real life.
Did you have fun making this project?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you can see a lot of those kids are pretty quiet in that video, and it's funny because most of those are really outgoing students, and as soon as you put a camera on them, they clam up a little bit. So I apologize if they're a little bit hard to hear. That was a video that we had put together for Brilliant Labs, but they really did enjoy the project, even if they seem a little less enthusiastic in the video. So I guess that's all I have.
I guess I can talk about the process that we had to go through with Brilliant Labs a little bit too. Brilliant Labs, they basically have a grant that you can apply for up to $500, and you go through this. You have to write about your entire project before you've done it and come up with a detailed plan. But essentially, they just try and figure out a way that they can help. So once you've gone through the application process, you just kind of bounce emails back and forth about how they can help you, and they were amazing for us. They sent us more filament when we ran out. After the original 2 were done, they sent us a bunch more so we could continue throughout the year printing other things. They checked in, and if a couple things came up towards the end of the year, but they were going to give our class a virtual tour and print one of our animals off on a bigger 3D printer. So our kids were pretty excited about that. But I just can't leave without sharing our appreciation to what Brilliant Labs did for us. And they also told us that our school could keep the 3D printers as long as they were being used. So if they start collecting dust, then we'll send them back to Brilliant Labs, and then they'll find some people who are willing to use it, because they're just trying to get technology into the classroom and get people learning in a different way. So again, the process to start this project, it wasn't very, once we had the idea, the ball started rolling very quickly. And it was, again, a very, very fun and rewarding project for the 2 of us. And we've got some ideas for next year. We're both teaching different grade levels next year, but we'll figure out a way to incorporate it into our class however we can. Yeah, so again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and we want to just kind of, if you had any questions, now would be the time.
Yes, folks, if there's no other questions, that will conclude our session for today. On behalf of LEARNEast, I'd like to thank Dan and Sarah for their expertise today. You made a comment in the chats. Your students were very fortunate to have 2 individuals as yourselves, not only showing the skills in the software, the hands-on manipulations, but also showing them patience, because I'm sure as adults, sometimes things didn't go very well and you kept your cool, because those students strive to get their work done. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for sharing with us today. Attendees, if you notice in the chat window, I put up the form for you to fill out for the prizes. Our last session will be at 3:45. So if you'd like to fill that out, you're welcome to. Again, the both of you, thanks very much for sharing. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
All right.
Thank you so much. You as well.
All the best.
Bye.